So today we're talking to Aaron Williams. Aaron is a longtime entrepreneur, having founded, grown and sold technology recruitment company Expand. Since then, Aaron's worked with various globally recognized brands, including Apple, and is now in the process of establishing a new consultancy in the digital marketing and technology arenas. Aaron, we're really excited to talk to you today. Thanks for sharing your time with us.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
So you've been working with technology businesses for some time now, where it's notoriously difficult to find great people. Do you think it's getting harder or easier?
Unfortunately, the answer is it's getting harder. At this stage, the convergence between marketing and technology is really driving the digital agenda, and we're seeing organisations across the country really struggle to find the people with the skill sets that they're looking for. The old rules are being thrown out the door. The preconceived notions that you need someone from the industry that you're working in or you need someone with X number of years experience just doesn't hold today. You need to look at capability, at skill sets, and be flexible and adaptable when you look at your hiring needs today. But look, there is a shortage of candidates, and it's only going to get worse at this point in time with the ageing population we've got coming up.
So that actually leads right into our next question. So, a key audience for us is tech startups and small businesses. And as you know, in growing companies, hiring people is a big deal, where each new person can really make a huge difference, and getting the wrong person can be very costly. So, I just want to explore, particularly from your experience, if there's any way that these small companies can fast track the process. So I'd ask, either in your experience hiring for your own companies or helping other people, what non-job specific things do you look for when hiring top talent?
In terms of non-job specific aspects, one of the key factors that you can look at is to really assess the individual's level of awareness of their self and their focus. So a key discriminator for me is really looking through the individual's own lens to see where do they see themselves at in their career, where do they see themselves at in life, and how self-aware are they? And individuals with a high level of awareness and emotional intelligence tend to be better learners, they're more adaptable, they work well with others, and they can fit into a variety of cultures. And in terms of building up a small business, or if you're going through that rapid escalation that startups do, having individuals with that confidence in themselves, that capability to grow and develop with the business is a huge asset. We see a lot of businesses come unstuck when they only focus on skills, and they do struggle with individuals that have got particularly strong skill sets but don't have that flexibility or that sense of awareness. And often they force the organisation to try and grow around them, rather than going along the journey that the business is on. So, it's a key discriminator for me in terms of what I look for. The other aspect is, and it goes a long way, particularly in high pressure situations, is individuals with a sense of humour. There's no shortage of people that are focused on outcomes, and that's great, and you need to, really drive that productivity forward. But we're all humans, we're all people, and, we enjoy the company of others greatly. And I think individuals that can achieve great outcomes with a sense of humour and a smile on their face goes a long way.
So how can leaders build a culture that overcomes a fear of failure and encourages experimentation, learning and growth?
Look, first of all, you need to carve out time to reflect and time to think. It's critically important for individuals to have the opportunity to understand, what did I do? What was the impact? What went wrong? What went right? And ultimately, what are the lessons from it? And if leaders don't create environments where individuals have that time and that space to do that, and then engage with them on what they've taken away, you're not going to get the benefits of that. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. The issue is if you just paste over it and just keep pushing forward without that reflection, you don't get the opportunity to learn. That's hard to do. And scheduling and organising, a diverse group of people or, a team that's working towards deadlines can be very difficult. But get innovative. Get out there, go for a breakfast down by the beach or the seaside. Go for a walk in the park to discuss the lessons that have come out of last week's challenges. You have to break the mould and get out of that standard office dynamic to really get those lessons and free our minds to really reflect on those lessons.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. I mean, especially in small businesses where things are moving a million miles an hour, it seems like that's often forgotten, and it's just focus on the next goal and the next big outcome that the company is striving for. Now, especially in small businesses, there's a lot of kind of new CEOs and managers. And one of the things I've found that they often struggle with is management meetings. They kind of turn out messy. They're hard to get right. There often are too many people, or the agenda isn't clear. How do you structure and run your management meetings?
I think there's a difference between general meetings and management meetings. If it's a management meeting, theoretically, you should limit that to between 5 and 8 people at a maximum.
Yep.
Once you get over 8, it's very difficult for individuals to feel connected, to productively contribute to the meeting, and you really start to lose the power of that time. If you can keep it to a small, concise, powerful group of minds, have a clear-cut agenda, understand what individual strengths and weaknesses are in that meeting, and don't be afraid to play to it and to get other people's opinions, to throw ideas around. I think meetings that are just there to disseminate information only can really do people's heads in. So, bring topics that need discussion, that need the collective input of the people you've got. If you've got issues that are just simply communication pieces or general updates, find better forums for it.
And how often do you think they should be held?
Well, the cadence of meetings really depends on the workload, the type of business you're in, and what deliverables you're working to. In my experience, not a day goes by that I don't touch base with my core group, my core leadership team.
Yep.
And that constant interaction keeps your finger on the pulse. Typically, I wouldn't let a week go past without some sort of small sit down, but larger management meetings really should be conducted at the end of the month to review what were the goals, what do we achieve, and what are we doing moving forward for the following month.
And do you have any tips for how you can track outcomes or actions that are discussed in these meetings?
Look, that's a difficult one. The standard is, to take minutes and to review minutes. That is painstaking. It's quite administrative, and quite often individuals don't really take to it. So it can be challenging. Typically, in my experiences, I get individuals to self-note their action points and to report back at the end of the meeting. It's a great way for me to understand who was listening, who was engaged, what's been missed, and does save me a huge amount of time and productivity in terms of having to allocate outcomes moving forward. That way I can manage by exception. If 1 or 2 points have been missed, I can manage that through. But typically empowering others to set the action items coming out of the meeting really ensures buy-in and focus.
Okay, so I just want to change tack a little and ask you a bit about your personal productivity. There's many different techniques out there, such as David Allen's Getting Things Done, the Pomodoro technique, and many others. One thing that's for certain is that there's no one size fits all. So do you use any particular productivity methodology?
Look, good question, Paul. I think fundamentally when it comes to productivity, I've always focused on keeping it simple. I find that there's a lot of different theories, a lot of different approaches you can take, but simple has worked best for me. I look at a 4-quadrant theory, look at what's urgent and important, what's not urgent and unimportant, and I tend to scale and track my tasks according to that quadrant. Once I understand what that task list looks like each day, I use a tool called AnyDo, which is basically a task manager and organisation tool, sort of glorified to-do list manager in that respect. It does allow me to be quite structured and planned in what are the outcomes I need to achieve in any given day. I like the fact that I can collaborate with peers within my work group. It lets me keep notes and information pertinent to what I need to do. It is limited by the fact that I can't engage with any of my customers. I can't reach out beyond my work group, which is a challenge. But fundamentally, it is a tool that helps me at least stay on track and those directly connected to me understand what are the priorities and tasks we need to run through on any given day.
Aaron, what does your typical day look like?
I don't think there is a typical day. I think, particularly over my career, I've enjoyed a lot of variety of challenge and roles, and depending on what state the business I'm in is at a particular point in time, my role will flex accordingly. But I do start every day up early as the sun rises. I concentrate on doing some sort of physical activity to start the day, whether or not that's hitting the gym, whether or not that's getting out for a walk, whether or not that's doing a hot yoga session. I'll get something out of the way to clear my mind, to really make sure that I'm in the best state possible. From that point, I'll always sit down at the beginning of my day and run through what are the tasks that I've got on for that day, what's urgent, what's not, who do I need to connect with, and I'll set a plan out for each day. That could involve travel, it could involve conferences, sales visits, good old recruitment, lots of interviewing, lots of connecting with people.
Yep.
You do end up with a serious addiction to coffee in this industry. Very hard not to. But look, there's always, the information that you got at hand to plan your day. But the reality is, one call from a client can throw everything in tailspin, and you've got to, down tools and get after an urgent assignment. So, there's a degree of variety, but I do my best to stay planful and focused through it.
Absolutely. And do you have any policies around how many meetings you have in a day, or whether you hold them in the morning or the afternoon?
It's important to understand what points in the day you're most productive, and that's different for everyone. And as I've built businesses and brought teams together, I've always stayed open and mindful to understanding what that is. I've had some recruiters that do their very best work between 7 and 10 p.m. And as a consequence, I keep quite flexible, in terms of the management process and how that runs for their time. But look, ideally, if you try and meet with more than 7 or 8 people in a given day, you do end up, overloaded. You do end up on the fritz. But from a sustainable perspective, and a productivity perspective, you really want to look to engage with a minimum of 2 people each day and make sure you've got that sort of connection basis. So, a fairly broad lane to stay in, but over the years, I've learned that that's about the sweet spot.
One of the big challenges that people seem to be dealing with at the moment is information overload. We've got emails, there's newsletters and articles we want to read. We've got, notes from meetings to follow up on, even text messages and chat messages. How do you deal with information overload?
Look, I've got 2 young kids, and the joys of having boys is that they do lots of sporting activities, and I try and balance and manage things out. But one of the rituals is that every weekend I drop them off to their kung fu classes, and I use that hour that they're training to sit down and just quietly catch up on any of the overload information over the given week that I've missed, whether or not that's a great article to read, whether or not that's some messages I need to compile for Monday morning, whatever it is. That's always a great time for me to sit down and just have some clarity and peace and quiet to focus on that aspect before the weekend gets underway and things get out of control.
So during that time, or even during your morning ritual when you're planning things out, how do you know what to prioritize and spend time on?
It's part experience. You tend to understand over time what certain activities take from an input perspective. Having been in recruitment for a very long time, you get a sense of particular assignments and the level of difficulty it's going to take to achieve an outcome there. So you need to balance that out. Taking feedback from others, very rarely do we achieve all of our goals simply on our own work. So understanding where other people are at with their particular workload, making sure that the time we've got to work together is structured and set up at appropriate intervals during the week for us to get an outcome is really important.
So in every small business, or certainly in every startup, there seems to be a million things to do all at once, and often short-term tasks get prioritized, like proposals for customers and presenting to investors, and they often come at the risk of losing sight of those longer term goals, releasing products or entering new markets. What tips do you have for balancing urgent short-term tasks with medium and long-term business goals?
I think I need to come back to that concept of taking time. It is so important that we carve out opportunities to reflect and think. And you can use a proportion of that time to reflect on what you've done, what mistakes you've made, what goals you've kicked, and take the lessons from that. But it's also important to use part of that time to look ahead. to reflect on where the business is and to review what your goals were and how you're tracking towards that. That's a key aspect. The other part is make sure you have an inner circle of individuals whose opinion you trust, who are stakeholders in the vision and the journey of the business, and constantly interrogate where the business is at against those goals and outlines. For me, as I grew, expand, every 3 months we would sit down as a leadership group without fail and reflect on the overall vision. What were the goals that we set out to achieve in that particular quarter of the year, and how have we gone against that? And we would use that to blue sky, we would use that to brainstorm, we'd challenge ideas, we'd throw a lot of concepts out the door, but it was always incredibly valuable time for us. It can be difficult to stick to that. Sometimes you've got pressing issues and challenges, whether that's financial or client driven, that come up, but taking a really, really strong commitment to ensuring you do that does keep you on track in the longer term and makes those shorter term goals a lot easier because they've got the context of the bigger picture behind them.
That makes a lot of sense. And just digging a little bit on that, there's often a lot of projects on the go, often, a few large projects on the go. And many people, especially in kind of small and medium businesses, they have less structure and formality around their project management. So just taking it back to basics for, the untrained project manager, in your experience, what are the key elements to a successfully run project?
Stay agile, know your team, and do not ever be afraid of over communicating. The opportunity to sit down for 2 minutes with someone and check in on how they're going on a particular task, to sit down and bring 2 or 3 people together to help solve someone's issues that you've uncovered can go a long way to really driving a project to its appropriate outcome on time and on budget. But a good PM will understand their people, know their strengths and weaknesses, and stay incredibly connected across that so that they can orchestrate and architect an outcome appropriately.
And how important do you think it is to have a formal project management methodology?
Look, I think that's the backbone of what you do. I think you can always fall back on that and it's reliable. You know when your review points, when your milestones are coming up, and I think that provides some good structure. But if you don't flesh that with an agile approach that keeps you connected across your team, keeps you plugged in and really engaging at the coalface of the project, and making sure that you're flexible and dynamic enough to change tact or to reallocate resources appropriately, you're not going to get the best outcome possible. So I think it's a mix. You need that structure and you need that rigidity to fall back on and to really give you the opportunity to flesh that out with a more agile and a dynamic approach.
Right. So at ScribblePost, we're obviously very passionate about helping others improve their productivity, and I don't think there's a company on earth that doesn't want to be more productive. So, just zooming out for a second, what's the number one thing you think companies can do to lift their overall productivity?
Wow, that's the $1 million question, or $1 billion question these days, actually. But look, I think there is a huge amount of tools available. There's a lot of technology in play, and there's limited time. And I think understanding what tool sets are the best tool sets for you that provide you the opportunity to connect with as many people productively as possible plays a big role. The limitations of the modern productivity suite, your email clients, your to-do lists, they're functional to a degree, but they don't get us where we need to get to. So encouraging your team to step outside common practice and common products to really search for tools that are cutting edge and are more reflective of the way we operate in today's workforce plays a big role. The other piece is find the time to reflect. If you keep pushing without stepping away to reflect on the lessons, to take a view of what you are looking to achieve in the future, and really engaging across your team, you're not going to get there. You will burn out. You will drive yourself and your team and ultimately your business into the ground if you take that approach. So I like to keep a good balance, and the better your productivity tools, the more opportunity you've got to take that time to reflect and recharge and stay in balance.
Great response there. I love that one. So I've just got one final question for you. Putting aside global goodwill, things like world peace and philanthropy, what would be the most exciting news headline you could hope to read in the next 10 years and why?
Paul, well, you're finishing with a tough one. Look, ultimately, I do have a great concern over where we're going as a planet with overpopulation and the fact that we're dealing with significant climate change. So I think from a headline perspective, I'd love to see that there's some sort of a breakthrough in our ability to deal with climate change, that, the ability for us to manage our emissions and to be responsible citizens in the planet in some way, shape and form has either been solved or we've made a great breakthrough there. I think that to me would brighten the future for my kids and certainly put a big smile on my face.
Fantastic, and I definitely agree. Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Paul, an absolute pleasure. Take care.